ESPN's NBA rank came out today, and there are some controversial rankings. And then on top of that, the NBA and the NBPA had some serious new talks in their potential CBA coming up, including draft eligibility changing from 19 years old to 18 years old. Could make some big switches. Let's talk about it on Locked On NBA Big Board.
You are Locked On NBA Big Board, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up? My name is Richard Stamen. You probably know me better as Mavs Draft on Twitter. It's been a little bit, but we are back to, we are getting into the 5 days a week. I think we're doing that next week is when that comes back. We are your only NBA draft show that is 5 days a week, every day, every week. We are here for you. A little bit about me, if this is your first time listening, despite me wearing a Phoenix shirt right now. I am from Dallas. I'm credentialed in college basketball around DFW, mostly TCU's my home spot, but I also go around the country going to combines, events, private workouts, and just other college and high school basketball games. So I'm big time involved in basketball around the Metroplex, but find myself pretty familiar around the entire game from top to bottom on every single team in the pros and mostly throughout college. So for today's episode, and before I get into this, actually, I want to thank everybody who's listening. Again, I know it's the final leg of the off season, but there's a lot of other stuff you could be listening to. MLB is pretty popular. NFL just came back, but really appreciate you making Locked On NBA Big Board your first listen of the day to hear me talk about this NBA rank and then just the potential impact of the changes made for the draft this upcoming year. So NBA rank came out this year, and there are some really controversial rankings. I think ESPN does this in a way to kind of drive up some clicks and whatnot. So I get it. I'm not trying to take a ton of value into this, but man, there are some questionable decisions on here. So for those that haven't read it, it's on ESPN. Pretty sure it's not on ESPN Plus. Anybody can read this. They released 100 through 25. And if you're like me, I personally missed the days when they did all 450 players. It's a little bit harder with the two ways now. It's not that many, but they would do everybody who's on a roster. They would release it starting at training camp and release it like the day of the regular season. They would inch it out. And the rankings generally were pretty good. Carmelo Anthony would be randomly ranked either too high or too low every year, but I kind of miss those days. Instead, now it's just 100, and there are some very, very questionable decisions on here. I'll start with one that I don't think has got enough controversy. For me, it's Anthony Simons is really low. I personally don't understand how he is number 90. You look at somebody who's probably going to fill in the CJ McCollum role pretty well. I don't think that a guy who just came off of, even though he only played 57 games and the Portland season had a lot of empty stats, I don't think his really were. I think it was a true flash of a fourth-year player who is going to take that jump as he enters his second contract. And the first year of the second contract is this year. He averaged 17 points a game, 4 assists. I think you'll see that assist number rise, especially given that he has Damian Lillard back and Jeremy Grant's there. They just got better. So with more talent, more shots will be made. But he averaged 4 assists. That was up from 1.4 per game. The assist over doubled. The turnovers also doubled. But, it's still a 2-to-1 ratio, almost identical ratio that he had. So not really concerned. Just the volume scaled up. That's a good thing. He also shot 44% from the field, or 41% from three, 40.5, 41, however you want to call it, and 89% from the free throw line. So this is a guy who, he's probably not going to get 50% shooting just because of his play style, being a below the rim perimeter oriented player. But this is a guy who could easily get 40%, 90%, 40% from three, 90% from the line every single year on almost 20 points a game. That's a top 50 player. You're looking at somebody who gets to top 50. Now, the question mark for him, I understand in a way why he is lower. I'm not calling for him to be like top 50 right now. I think just projecting where he is, he's still really young. As of right now, he is still, he's a brand new 23. And for me, when he's raw. He didn't take a jump from being raw to actually serviceable till this year. I think you're looking at somebody who has a really good chance of being top 50. I think he's one of the best up and coming young players in the league. I just love his ability to scale into that CJ McCollum role. I think he has the potential to be a top 50 player. Some other snubs that really stood out to me. There's some players on. I don't really have an issue with a ton of the players on here. It's just more of where the rankings are. And also this kind of speaks to where the league is. There's 150 players who I think are the top 150 is better than the top 150 has ever been. And it continues to get better and better. So my next gripe was, it's not directly with this player, but number 82 is the lone Orlando Magic player on here. And it's the one player who hasn't played a game on this entire list. Everybody else is not a rookie. Paolo Banchero is the only rookie on here. I don't have an issue with him being 82. I think he's going to be a top 100 player rookie year. That's not debatable. But he's not the best player on his own team. And I honestly don't know if he'll be the second best player on his own team. And that's not a slight to Paolo at all. I think if you're like me, I also go by Magic Draft on Twitter. I'm big on the Orlando Magic. I watch every game. I'm from Orlando, so I've always had an attachment growing up watching them. So I continue that into adulthood. I really don't know the last season. I didn't watch every game. And for me, it's Wendell Carter really took a jump. I don't think people understand what Wendell did. And I think the stats also underrate him simultaneously. You look at, he jumped to a career best 15 points a game, had 10.5 rebounds, 3 assists. This is a center, mind you, at 6'11", 6'10", 6'11", depending on if you judge by shoes. I mean, 15, 10, and 3 is all-star numbers for a center. Let's just pull up Vucevic's stats for when he was in Orlando. And I guarantee you, like some of his early seasons, the scoring is better. Everything else is really not that far off. You look at, I mean, his first all-star season, yeah, he had more of everything, but like it's not that crazy far off. He had 21, 12, and 3.5. That's not that crazy. And he generally did that. But the year before his all-star season, when people were like, hey, this is an up-and-comer, he was getting 16.5 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, which is almost identical to that 15, 10.5, and 3. And he's getting an actually, fun fact, Wendell Carter is more efficient than any season in this last year than Nikola Vucevic had in terms of field goal percentage. So you look at the three-point percentages rising. He took a career best, or career most 3.5 threes a game. Before that, it was 1.3, and he shot 33% from 3. That's where I think the stats really underestimate him. You're looking at the ability to take threes. I mean, he was taking movement off the dribble, spot up threes. You're doing everything as a big man from 3. I'm not expecting just magically 35+% league average. Yeah, his numbers are going to be below average because of the shots he's taking, but I think that's something down the road, 100% you see improvement on. So I think Wendell Carter should be on there. And then the obvious one, how on earth is Franz Wagner not on there? We all just saw one of the most complete rookie seasons. He was an all-rookie first team. All the other 4 all-rookie guys are on this list. So unless Franz, they see top 25, which I'm not going to complain about, but I highly doubt they're giving the Orlando Magic that respect. It's weird. 15.5 points a game, 3 assists, 4.5 rebounds, 1 steal, only 1.5 turnovers, 47% shooting, 35% from 3, 86% from the line. Like, what hole is there in his game? He was a good defender, really good passer, didn't make mistakes. And he's super young. Like, he just turned 21 at the end of August. Like, he is brand new 21. What else could you want from somebody that young? Like, at 21 years old, I expect him personally to be top 75, top 50 player. Like, what separates him right now from Jalen Green, all those guys in the other all rookie team from last year? Because yes, their upside, I would not argue that all 4 of the other guys probably have better upside, but like, what separates them right now? If you're just projecting for 2022, 2023, I don't think there's a big difference. So I had a big gripe with that. And then the last one, this is not geared towards younger players, but Dorian Finney-Smith should be on this list. He's one of the best 3-and-D guys in the league. He is quite literally just 3-and-D. And actually, though, this last year, he did take a jump in other areas. While he was doing the same things on defense and three-point shooting, he became a little bit more capable with the ball in his hands. And he's also, the Mavs put out a stat, for the first 5 or 6 years, I think it was his full 6 years, every single year, all of his stats have gone up. I mean, it starts with points. I think he's like one of a few players, maybe the only player, something like that, to go increase his points every single year the first 6 years of being in the league. 4.3, 5.9, 7.5, 9.5, 9.8, and then 11 points a game last year. And on top of that, you look at he averaged 2 assists a game. That was a career best. The assists also have done identical things, except for sophomore and junior, too college-minded. Second and third year in the league, he stagnated at 1.2 assists, but every other year it's been up, up, up. So his turnovers don't ever jump, despite his assists going up every single year. I think there's a lot to be said for somebody like him. Consistently 39% from three the last few years, ever since the pandemic. I think it's all repeatable. That's a top 100 player, somebody who plays good defense and all that. But the NBA rank is just always controversial. I'm interested to see what the top 25 looks like, but we will get to that in just a moment. But I want to tell you about our friends over at Bet Online. If you're not watching on YouTube, you're missing out on a brand new graphic that we are putting up. We never do the graphics. We are brand new into it, so hope you like it. But betonline.net is your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Also NBA. I mean, like preseason's a week and a half away, 2 weeks away. You can find all the latest football and NBA, MLB league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week games for the NBA and everything, and also just week 3 of college, NFL week 4 of college football. And BetOnline is also your continued source for all your sporting and wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. They're the fastest and easiest way to go check in on all your favorite sports and events. Like I said, they have MLB, they have MMA, boxing, golf, every sport, they have it on there. So go ahead to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. So, as promised, I wanted to talk about the NBA rank and also some of the up and coming impacts of the new NBA and BPA player negotiations. Let's continue. I'll kind of blend both of them here. The player rank. Let's just keep going through it. Lonzo Ball is number 78. He was 57 last year. Was horribly overrated in that regard. He was good when he played, but I think there's something to be said about availability. I don't know if Lonzo Ball ever plays more than 55 games ever again. I mean, his knee is really bad. We don't know when he's going to play this year. That's alarming. I think there are 2 Grizzlies on here that might be slightly overrated. Brandon Clark at 94 and Dylan Brooks at 77, especially when you look at 3 guys that are on there right away that I could name that should be on here that aren't. Could also, and for me, over at least Brandon Clark, which I think he's a good player, but you look at volume has to matter somewhere. I'd probably put Jeremy Grant over Brandon Clark right now also. So, there's a good amount of guys. Ben Simmons is number 76. He was number 28 preseason last year. If that, that's wild to think. And he didn't play a single game. So I'm really interested to see where Ben Simmons ends up. Had an absolute nightmare of a scenario last year. I feel bad for the guy. And actually, he's going to be a little bit relevant in the next segment when I talk about some of the changes in NBPA, what they're negotiating for in the next CBA. But we'll get to him in a bit. But I think he's a little bit underrated. If he plays, he's back to close to top 50 at least, especially when you have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving next to him to really make up for some of his shortcomings. OG Anunoby is number 75. I felt that was really low. He was also 72 last year. I don't really know why the words they wrote don't match his ability. They said the swing skill of shot creation, Anunoby averaged a career high 17 points a game last season, but also did it with below average efficiency, 55 true shooting percentage. He shot 7% better than league average on shots with fewer than 2 seconds of touch, but 12.5% worse when he had the ball longer than that. I don't know if I actually buy that being a relevant stat personally. I think that's a lot of context there. He still shot. He's every year since before the COVID year, 2019 to current. He's averaging 38% from 3, and he's doing that on really good efficiency. Yeah, his overall field goal percentage is dropping, but over those 3 years, still 47%. And he's always floating. In the last 2 years, he's floated 16, 17 points a game. I don't see why he won't be able to do it. I think Toronto's gotten a little bit better this offseason too. I think he's underrated. I personally would have had him top 65 at least. It's also John Collins, 73. He definitely got limited last year. I think Nate McMillan is still struggling to find out how to use him, but DeJounte Murray is going to do wonders for him. Michael Porter Jr. is another guy who, if I'm going to bash Ball for the same thing, Michael Porter Jr., we've always had the injury risk since draft time. How is he number 72 and other guys aren't on here? It really blows my mind. Let's take a look at some other guys. I think Desmond Bane is pretty underrated still, number 68. He's right behind Jalen Brunson, Miles Turner, Russell Westbrook. I don't think it's close. I think Russell Westbrook is very clearly on the decline. I get that he's a former MVP, but when you are at his age, he's about to be 34. He's a guy who we've always talked about at his, when I guess 5 years ago, we talked about, I remember seeing the Reddit threads of who's somebody who relies so much on athleticism, they're going to decline the second that athleticism goes. Like they're going to be rapidly declining. And I think it's Russ. Yes, the stats don't look bad. He averaged 40. I mean, he shot 44% from the field last year and on 18 points a game, 18 and a half, sorry, 7 rebounds, 7 assists. That's actually still pretty good. Like all things considered, his stats are underrated. But if you're trying to win right now, if you were to swap both guys at where they are, if you put, granted, again, not the best situation for Russ again, but it kind of speaks to Russ. There has to be, it has to factor in, if Russ was swapped to most teams, how many teams is he actually making better? Whereas if you said, hey, let's put Desmond Bane on a team, how many teams is he making better? And I understand it's an unfair argument because of how Russ plays, but in a way that has to be factored in. Desmond Bane's still up and coming. I think his shot creation and just overall creation ability really took a step forward that nobody paid attention to. He averaged almost 3 assists per game, upped it by 1 full assist per game. And he was running pick and roll, really good in transition. It was stuff I saw at least at TCU. And actually, I didn't realize Jeremy Grant is on here, so disregard my comment on him over Brandon Clark. So I guess that kind of ended up being true anyways. But yeah, so I just kind of tied that off with seeing that. But Desmond Bane should be higher than Russ. Jalen Green's at 62. I think he'll be a lot better than that for this season. I think he's a top 55 player at the least. Definitely better than Kyle Lowry, who's number 60. Tyrese Halliburton just had a killer year with Indiana. He's a guy I don't really feel like people know how good he was in Indiana just because they didn't watch him. And yeah, bad team stats can be inflated, but in Indiana in 26 games, it was nuts. 17 and a half points a game, just about 10 assists a game. It was 9.6. And that was on 50% shooting. Like I firmly stand by Rick Carlisle is a point guard savant with anybody who can shoot, make very smart decisions on the fly quickly, and just is adaptive to their environment. And Tyrese Halliburton does all of those things, and he's a high-level playmaker. Like that's a great fit for Carlisle. Even if the Pacers aren't trying to win this year, I think he's still great for it. I'll round out the top 50 and then kind of tie in why I brought up Ben Simmons here. But Jordan Poole at 55, I think that's kind of fair. I think you could see an argument for him moving up. De'Aaron Fox is at 54. Could see him a few spots up. That's not anything egregious. I'm wearing a DeAndre Ayton shirt right now, if you can see it on YouTube. He's number 51. Last year, he was 35. I'm interested to see what happens there. Like, I don't really have a ton of insight. This is just something I found interesting. But I'm really interested to see where he ends up this year because the whole way his season ended, he had a great first two games, I would say, in that Mavs Suns series. And then, like, suddenly frozen out, which I get why he was frustrated. And then in game 7, he wouldn't even check back in. So for me, I'm kind of like, where do you go from there? For me, it's kind of alarming. But also at the same time, his physical skills and abilities should absolutely warrant a top 50 player. Like, I'm also curious to see if he gets traded. Like that just can't be taken off the table. We've seen Jay Crowder's in the mix for being traded. Maybe he gets part of a bigger package so the Suns get a bigger return, but I don't think they can do anything now, so that's kind of irrelevant. So maybe down the road they still are wanting to move off of Crowder, I guess. But other than that, what are you going to do with them? So I'm curious what the Suns do, but that's the NBA top 50, or excuse me, top 100 ranking. The reason I want to talk about Ben Simmons, though, is the Athletic and Shams Charania posted news about the NBPA and NBA's negotiations on a new CBA. Something really interesting, and I think a lot of this has to do with Ben Simmons because he was name dropped. They're going to do something that would be unprecedented. It's a very progressive change. These are Shams's words for American pro sports, and they want to discuss measures to allow players to cite mental health issues as an ailment similar to physical injury, and pretty much so. You know, you hear about, hey, I have a lingering knee issue. If you're having, personally, but I'll give my quick stance. These people are humans. Treat them like humans. I think, yes, we hold them to higher standards because they are paid the big bucks. They do they're the best of the best. I get it. But if they're not feeling right, address that. I'd rather players be 100% healthy for their time, like physically and mentally, for when they do play, rather than forcing it and playing at 50%, for every game. That just doesn't add up to me. So I think it's really good. Ben Simmons was name dropped. They said basically because he wasn't playing with them. He revealed to them that he he was having he wasn't mentally able to play because of all the pressure that came last year, which I fully understand. So I think it's really interesting. I want to talk though a little bit more coming up about some of the other big things going on with the NBPA's negotiations. But first, a quick word from our from our sponsors. So back here on Locked On NBA Big Board, my name is Richard Stamen. You probably know me better as @Mavs Draft on Twitter. So the NBPA, they're negotiating for some new stuff coming up in the NBA or the CBA, excuse me. The big thing, this one really applies to our show. Wanted to talk about it last, kind of go out with a bang, I guess. So the 2024 draft is going to see a lot of new impacts, I should say. They are proposing a new draft age. Pretty much what it is now is you have to turn 19 or 18, excuse me, the year before you can go to the draft. So one player who has been recently affected by this, Victor Wembanyama, you have to turn 18 December 31st of the same year you are entering or prior to the draft, right? So Alexei Pokachevsky, for example, in 2020 was a 2000 baby who turned 19 right then, if I'm not mistaken, on the last day. Victor Wembanyama turned 18 this year, so he has to spend the whole year being 18 before he can go into the draft. Technically, it's supposed to be like, 19 is your draft age, but really it's you turn 18 the year before the draft. So young players cannot do this. This has been a thing for almost 20 years now. They're trying to reverse that. They're trying to say, hey, it should be 18. This would clear the way for high school players to basically make the jump into the NBA. This could be done during the next CBA cycle. Sources say they're hopeful, per Shams. And this would change a lot. Now, one thing they talked about is they said the one and done rule really won't be touched by this. They're not trying to overthrow college right now. Keywords right now. But, for me, the impact that it makes is you already have the G League Ignite, right? People are going there. You get about 4 to 5 guys every year. Really, this year's almost an exception. We had a guy, Leonard Miller, who declared for the draft, withdrew, and then went to the G League Ignite. So I don't really think he's like a game changer in that regard. You have City Sissoko, who I'm pretty sure came from overseas. And then also you have F.A. Abagidi, who came over from Washington State after 2 years. So this is not a normal class. My question is, will this actually make more high school players come out? Maybe some of the top guys are going to go, I don't want to go somewhere just to go somewhere. But maybe my thing is it really going to make a double draft? I think some of that stuff is a little bit overstated. But the impact where it's not overstated is, what are the teams who just started a rebuild going to do? Are they in a better position? Are teams that are flirting with the idea going to go to a rebuild? And I think actually the answer is yes. You look at the teams that are absolutely tanking this year. I think there's only a few that are standout tanking, right? You got the Utah Jazz. I mean, they just blew everything up. You have the San Antonio Spurs, who also blew everything up. I think by nature, Oklahoma City, they tanked last year. They didn't change their roster pretty much because Chet Holmgren's injured. I think Portland gets better, but that kind of replaces San Antonio. Not really sure anybody in the West tanks. I guess Houston has to, because they're in the hardest division and they were the worst team in the NBA last year. And they don't make a jump overnight like that. I think somebody out of Orlando, Detroit, Indiana is going to tank. Maybe even Charlotte is in that mix. I don't really think it's Detroit personally, and it's hard to see Indiana with Rick Carlisle as the coach there tanking. I could say the same, I guess, about Steve Clifford, but here's my thing. Our team's going to go this year, especially, say this does get past, say, hey, 2024, things are going to change. Our team's going to pull the trigger a little bit more easily, and I think the answer is absolutely yes. The league's going to get a little bit more and more top heavy because of this for, I think, short term, and it might trickle down into the long term in a way because teams get so good. I mean, we're looking at a lot of big teams are forming. I mean, because of this, Minnesota took major advantage of I would say they took advantage of a lot over the last few years, and they're in a great position. Whereas Utah just sold off to Minnesota. So I think Utah is kind of in a good position because they're in year one of the rebuild. They have absolutely no pressure. They're going for a great draft. In theory now, 2024 is a great draft. They're not going to just magically fix it overnight. Even if they do hit multiple times in 2023. They would have to hit multiple times in 2024 and then wait for the 1-year development jump, I would say, for all of that to happen. And they would have to kind of reshape some of their veterans. So for me, I think a team like Utah is in great position. Same thing with San Antonio. So you look at teams that have just started their rebuild, they're in awesome position. Orlando could be one of those too. They're not as much affected by it, I don't think, but Detroit is somebody who I think will be impacted by this, where, just these young and up and coming teams are going to get benefited, whereas teams that are kind of on the brink of blowing it up, you could say even Washington is always on this. And I feel bad for Wizards fans listening to this because it's annoying getting your name thrown every single year into the mix. I'm in Orlando. I've seen it with Orlando. Like from 2016 to 2021, or yeah, they were always like, oh, they got to blow it up now. And it was like 5 years of it. And nobody ever really gave them a chance. Of course, they probably should have. People were right. But Washington could be in this mix. They're almost in a do or die area just because they got Porzingis. He has a player option, if I'm not mistaken. I know there's some form of an option there. And if Bradley Beal doesn't win again, I don't know how much he's going to want to be there. Like, I know he wants to be the Dirk of Washington and all, which I respect. It's going to be a little bit hard. I think this could also, if Portland tanks, so I'll start the year, if they're down bad, you might see them blow it up because they would have 2 years to fully draft and rebuild, and boom, that falls right into that timeline. So same thing with Indiana. I don't really think any other team is a prime candidate. Maybe the Brooklyn Nets, because that has just the most potential to just almost go Jenga on them, where you're taking out a piece from the bottom and everything falls. So I think you could do that as an option. You'd see them as somebody who's a threat. But for now, I really don't see any other big threats to be tanking for that 2024 draft, but it really does change the landscape. I think teams are going to hold on now, not only to the 2023 picks more, but the 2024 picks because of this. Like, those are two potentially stacked classes, even though the 2023 recruiting class isn't that strong for the 2024 draft. Will be freshmen in college. The 2024 draft right now, or recruiting class, does look pretty good. I think it could just be a game changer. I'm personally not sold on this upcoming senior year class, but that's just me. But you look at 2024, there's a few guys that are just studs. Ian Jackson, he was just on the U18, or the U17s for the USA, absolutely killed it, and he's a rising sophomore. So he's a rising junior. My bad. So you have a lot of talent. There's Bryson Tucker. I really like him as well. I love Carter Knox. I think he's really good. There's just so many guys that I've already really began to like in that 2024 class, and I can't be the only one. I think NBA teams are going to see the star upside. Ian Jackson, I think, is absolutely worth tanking for. He's not even number one in his own class. Trey Johnson who's out of DFW, actually in my backyard pretty much. He's just right. I need to go see a game this year of him. He's really athletic, really good, skilled with the ball in his hands, and has good size over at 6'5", pretty much a creator. So you look at these 2024 guys, 2023 guys, teams are going to be reluctant to give up those picks. What this rumor alone does is it raises the value now of all picks. So teams asking for, hey, I want 1 first-round pick in the future, starts at 2025. If it's not a premier player, starts at 2025. So that really changes the landscape of the NBA. Speaking of the NBA, thank you for making Locked On NBA Big Board your first listen. Now go ahead and make NBA Top 50 on Locked On NBA your second listen. They're going over which NBA players move the betting lines this season. Locked On and BetOnline's Odd Makers, they present the NBA's top 50 most valuable players. You can find it on Locked On NBA wherever you get your podcasts on, and YouTube, which also we are on YouTube. Before the season starts, we'd love to get over 1,000 followers. We're a bit away from it right now, but it would mean a lot if we could get that. Let's see actually what we're at right now. Let's take the official count. We are at, actually, I said 1,000. I wanted 4,000 as well. I was looking at. We're at 3,000 right now. I don't know where I got such a low number, but we're really trying to rise. The NBA, Locked On NBA, whole entire umbrella is way above us. We want to catch up and show them we can hang. Replacing Chad Ford here a few months ago with Raphael, me, Leaf, and Sam. We got a lot of fun stuff coming up, especially as the season comes along. We're going to be talking about some of the young players, what we see. We're also going to talk draft. College basketball is only a month and a half away, believe that or not. We have so much fun stuff planned for you. And again, we are the only draft show that goes 5 days a week, every single week of the season. So you don't want to miss it. We'll be here. Again, my name, Richard Saman, at Maps Draft. It's all circled for you right here on the bottom left of your page. if you're on YouTube. And also, if you're listening on podcast, I apologize for accidentally coughing in your mic, or excuse me, in your ear, your car, wherever you're listening. But thank you so much for listening. My name is Richard Saman. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of your day.